Hi, I'm Maggie Weldon for Maggie's Crochet, and this Starbella Flash arm knitted scarf is sponsored by Premier Yarns. For this scarf, I used 2 strands of Starbella Flash held together as one strand. This yarn comes in 16 beautiful colors. It is a netting yarn. You can see that when you open it up here, and it's typically used to make ruffled scarves. But as you can see here, it works up great when used as a bulky strand, and it's a number 5 bulky. So to work with 2 strands, I pull one strand out of the center of each skein. I use 2 skeins, and I hold both strands together like this. And what you want to do to get started here is to measure out 2 yards. And the way I measure out 2 yards is I go like this. I just stretch my arm all the way out, and that's 1 yard, and then I just do 2 yards like this. So this 2-yard section will be referred to as the long tail when I do your close-up lesson. And the remaining yarn right here is referred to as the working yarn. So right now I'm going to switch to a close-up camera and show you how to make this scarf. It's super easy. You can probably, once you get going on it, you can probably make one in under 30 minutes. And you might want to have a pair of large knitting needles on hand. These are Deborah Norville knitting needles, in case you were to have to take the loops off of your arms, like if the doorbell rings or whatever. So, but when you take them off, when you take the loops off your hand, you want to make sure that you set it somewhere where you know which arm it came off of, so that you can easily slip them back onto your arm. So that's just one little tip. And the links to everything are listed below. And let's get started with your lesson. I've pulled a strand out of the center of each ball of yarn, and I've measured off 2 yards, and this is going to be called my long tail, and then this will be considered my working yarn, the yarn coming out of the skein. So at the 2-yard mark right here, I need to make a slip knot. So to make my slip knot, there are several ways to make it, but this is how I do it. You just wrap this cord, this strand over this like this, so this one's on the top, and then you bring that halfway to the halfway mark across the back of that circle, and then you pull that forward, and then you stretch this side out like this, and you'll notice you have a knot side and a slip side. You tighten the knot side, not too tight, and you leave a loop that's big enough to fit over your hand like this. And this will count as your first stitch. And now I'm going to show you how to cast on 4 more stitches, because this is a multiple of 5 stitches that we're going to be arm knitting. Okay, so to cast on, I've got my long tail over here and my working yarn over here, and I'm just going to go like this with my fingers spread out like this, and then I'm going to lift them up, and now you see just 2 strands across my hand. Now the first strand here, I'm going to go underneath it like this, then I'm going to curl this hand in and grab the outside of this loop over here and bring that through here and just put that on my hook. You don't twist it or anything, you just lift it onto your hook like this, and then you tighten both strands like that. So it should look like that on your arm. So now I'm going to go in again like this underneath the 2 strands like that. Just lift it up like this. Now I have the 2 strands. I'm going to come over here with my hand, go through the outside strand like this, curl my hand, and grab this one from behind like this. and put that on my arm, and then tighten both sides. And now I'll do the same thing again. You don't have to use 2 fingers, just as long as you grab those 2 strands up like this, and then you go under this side and grab this side and put the next one on your arm like that, and then you tighten both strands like this. Now I have 4 double strands here, so this will be 4 stitches, and then the last one is up again like this. So you're going like this. You got to make sure that the long tail's over here, because it's using all the yarn here to create these loops, and that's what you want to have happen. You don't want to have this creating the loops. So now I'm going to go under here, pick this up, grab this loop from this side, go over and get this loop, pull it off, let this loop drop down, and put this loop on my hand just like that. Then I'm going to tighten both strands like that. So that's my cast on right there. Now from this point forward, I will not be using the rest of this long tail, and I'll sew this end in when I get finished. So now I'm just going to be using my working yarn, and to do row 1, you hold wherever the loops are, you hold this in your hand like this. You take the opposite hand like this, and all you do is pull this over and put the loop on your opposite hand like that. And then you tighten up the strand. Okay, so then I'm going to hold this over here, and then I'm going to pull the next loop off. I'm going to drop it and put that on my hand, and then tighten this. Tighten the working yarn. Then I'm going to put this back in this hand, pull this one off, let it drop down, and put that loop on my hand. Once you get this going, you can go really fast. Now I'm going to grab this again with this hand, drop this down, and move that loop, and tighten. Tighten after every stitch. And then the same thing, pull this one off onto this working yarn and put that on your hand. So that's the end of row 1. I pulled out a lot of yarn. Okay, so you just tighten this up, and if you pull it down, you see how the loop stitches of row 1 look. Okay, so now I'm going to hold this in this hand, pull this one over, slip this onto the opposite hand, and tighten. Hold this here, pull this over, push that onto this hand. Hold this here, push this over, put it on the opposite hand. Pick this up again, pull this loop over, and it drops down on the working strand, and put that on the opposite hand and tighten. Hold this, move this over, put the loop up here, and tighten. So that's the end of row 2. Okay, so let me do this again. Hold this here, pull this over, move the loop over, and tighten. Put this back in this hand, pull this loop over and drop it, and put this loop on your hand and pull. Hold this back over here, move this loop over, drop it, and put it over here and tighten. Hold this here, move this over, put it on your hand, and tighten. Last loop, you're holding this here, pull this over, put it on the opposite hand, arm, and tighten like that. So that's the end of row 3 right there. Okay, I'll do it one more time from this side. Hold this, move this loop over, push that onto the opposite hand, and tighten. Hold this, move this off, push that on the opposite hand, the new loop. Hold this, bring this over, push it on the opposite hand. Okay. I've got a lot of yarn here. Okay, hold this. Move the loop, old loop off onto the new loop and put the new loop on your opposite hand. Okay, and hold this. Pull this off and push it onto the opposite hand. There. So that's the end of row 4. And now I'm going to show you how to bind off. Okay, so when you bind off, it doesn't matter which side that you end up on. When you bind off, you want to make sure that you have at least 2 yards left. So when you use up the 2 skeins, and when you look down and you see, oh, I only have like 2 or 3 yards left, it's time to start binding off. So it doesn't matter which hand you land up with. If the loops are all over here, you can bind off either side. So right now I'm going to bind off from this side, and to do it you just start the row like I've just showed you, and you grab hold of this, drop the loop off, put that over here and tighten. Then you do the next one the same way. I'm holding it here, move this off and drop it and put it over here. So now I've got 2 loops, and what I'm going to do now is to just drop my working yarn for a minute and take the first loop that I pulled off and bring that over the last loop that I just pulled off. So just pull it off and just let that drop. So then pick this yarn up again, take the next loop off like this, put it on your hand like this, pull it to tighten it, take the previous loop and just bring it over the new loop like that. Pick your working yarn up again, slide this over, slide that on new loop on your hand, and tighten it, always tighten. Take the previous loop, bring that over the new loop like that, tighten both strands, pick that up in this hand over here, take the last loop off like this, slide that onto your opposite hand, tighten it, and take your previous loop and move it over that loop like that. Okay, so you're left with 1 loop. You take that off your hand, make sure you don't drop this, and then you'll see here that you've got a little row of chains, and that's where I bound off. So then you take your scissors and you cut this off. So now when you bind off, you just cut maybe about 12 to 18 inches. I still have my loop here, so when I'm going to cut a little ways away from here like this, and then I'm going to with the loop that the last loop that I took off my hand, now I'm just going to take the entire end and stick it through that loop, and when I pull it like this, it locks it, and that pretty much won't come out right there. So you can pull it real tight, and then to weave the ends in on this thing, I really would just move these through the stitches, and then when maybe you want to follow the existing strands and just move them in and out around the scarf, and then at some point you can just maybe on the back side see if this looks like a knit stitch here, and then back here is a different look to the stitching. Okay, so then back here you could find a loop in the back and then just maybe bring a loop up like this and do one of those slip knots again where you pull the whole strand through. So something like that, and then just cut that off to finish it. And always cut flat. So then sew your other end in. So then I have another scarf here that I finished earlier. And if you wanted to, I have sewn in one end, the end from my starting row, from my, what was that called, long tail. And I still have, this was my end, so I left it extra long. And so what I would do if I wanted to sew this into a cowl is lay the whole thing out so that my stitches are all facing the same direction. So I've got all my stitching here, and then I would just sew that together like that. And if you wanted to, you could twist it, and to twist it, all you'd have to do is just turn this when you're sewing it together. But right here, all you'd have to do, this is the end right here. Now this was the beginning, the cast on, and this is the bind off right here. So you just match the 5 stitches together. You take your double strand, your leftover strand here. Okay, and then I would just do this by hand. You can use a big safety pin, you could use, they have big weaving needles, or you could use a crochet hook to help with this. But the stitches are so big that you could just grab a couple of strands like this, and then go over here and grab, it almost looks like a crochet chain up here. Grab a couple of strands over there and just bring that back and forth through the stitches like that. So see that? You won't even see that once it's all together. So just keep going back and forth with the strand and then weave it in like I showed you on the last piece. So I hope that you really enjoyed this video. I think it's just a lot of fun. It has a lot of possibilities for other yarns. And I can totally see doing an afghan out of something like this. You'd have to cast on somewhere between 30 and 40 stitches. And your long tail would be, I figured it out, I think it would be, you'd have to add a yard for every 3 stitches that you wanted to do. So this was 2 yards for 5 stitches, and then it was 3 yards for if you wanted to do something with 8 stitches, and then so it was like adding a yard for every 3 stitches. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this, and thank you very much for watching, and be sure to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.